Hello, welcome to Northwest Air Guns. I'm John, and today we're going to get back to our streak from hell and see if we can't get that gun up and running again. The first thing I want to do with it is repair the tube, and if you recall, the front end of the tube, that little piece on the bottom had been broken out, and so the tube's compromised. Come to find out that the tube is out of round as well. So we got a couple issues we're going to have to deal with, and I want to hit that part first because if we can't fix the tube, then the decision's kind of made for us that we're not going to go any further with that gun, and we'll set it aside and move on to a different project. But if we can get the tube structurally sound and back into round, then the gun's probably worth going through and cleaning up and fixing the rest of the things that are wrong with it. And the way we're going to fix it is we're basically just going to solder a piece to bridge the gap on the front of the tube. And soldering is not something I do a lot of. Soldering is not for the faint of heart. And if this was a valuable gun, or if a customer brought it in and it had sentimental value or something, due to somebody owned it or something like that that was important to the new owner, I'd probably recommend they send it off. Tim McMurray at Mac 1 Airgun Shop is one. Randy Bimrose at Bimrose Precision Airgun Repair is another. And these guys have been doing it for years, and their capabilities are way beyond anything I could do. So I would do that if it was a valuable gun. But in this case, I'm feeling emboldened because I can't make this gun any worse than it already is. I don't believe I can damage it any worse than it already is. So on that basis, we're going to go ahead and proceed and see if we can't get the tube cleaned up and made structurally sound, and then move on to the other parts that we're going to need to do with this streak from hell. So we're going to be working on the streak from hell, but I thought to contrast that, maybe we take a look at this one here, which is the tube from a mid-70s blue streak. And you can see that the tube is intact here on the end. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the process of making this rifle, they start with the tube, they cut out the slot here, drill the holes and whatnot, get that all done, and the final part of the process would be soldering in the barrel and the front sight and the compression chamber for the valve parts. But this is complete, and it's structurally complete, and so there's no problem here. Contrast that with our streak from hell, which on the one hand is been opened up here. So the tube has been compromised already. My guess is that somebody had a hard time figuring out how to get the pumping linkages out of here and probably busted that off. You rarely see this in a Sheridan, but it's not uncommon on the Benjamins to find this broken out. And again, I think it's because they were trying to take the linkages out. It could be some other cause that just the sheer amount of pumping or something weakened this and cracked it and it fell off or whatever. So that's one issue we have, is making this structurally as sound as we can, because there's quite a bit of pressure here on this end of the tube when you're pumping these things. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is solder a piece around a little more than half round on the outside of the tube, and just try and strengthen it. It's not going to be as good as new, but it'll be better than this, and you'll end up with a usable gun again. As long as it's not too heavily stressed, it should be all right. The other problem with this one, I think you can see, let's see here, the tube itself is out of round. So we have an issue with where they cut it off here, some I don't know if they twisted it or what, but it's deformed here, and then the tube itself is out of round. It's been deformed. I know that shows up real well, but it's not round like it's supposed to be. So we have a couple of things we have to deal with here. Well, this next discussion may seem unrelated to the issue of the streak from hell, but in fact it is related, and I'll bring it back around here in just a minute. But this is a 6-piece flaring tool kit, and what happened is a week or two ago, the wife and I were out for a walk through the neighborhood, and we happened to walk past a garage sale. The garage was open and stuff was out on the tables, like you find at garage sales. And so we stopped in because we were walking past, and the lady had a table, and she must have had 50 of these kits on the table. She wanted $4 each, $4 for each kit. And so I asked her, she said, well, my husband picks this stuff up somewhere. And so the garage is full of things similar to this, and I think they had a couple more boxes of these in the back of the garage. And so she was on a mission to get rid of these. And so I took a look, and I've never owned a flaring tool kit. I've never had the need for one my entire life, but I thought, well, if it's cheap enough, I suppose I could get one. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll get a couple, because then I can give one away, stocking stuffer at Christmas or whatever. But so I said, well, how about if I get 2 of them for $6? And the lady looked at me and she said, how about 3? And so so I walked out of there. It cost me $6, but I walked out with 3 of these. All 3 are totally unnecessary. I've managed to live my entire life without one, but now I've got 3. So I'll be giving these away to somebody. I don't know who. And it's interesting that when the wife decides to get rid of your stuff, she will get rid of it. And I have no idea if they made money on this or not, but like I say, she was on a mission. And when you find a wife on a mission like that, you can get some pretty good deals. The reason this is relevant is it got me thinking, because you have this cone-shaped tapered screw here, and I thought, well, how am I going to get this tube back to round, or as close to round as I can? And it got me thinking about making a fixture to go over the outside, to clamp the outside in the proper dimensions, and then get something with a taper to put on the inside and basically pound it into round as best we can. And so we've got this one here. You can take dimensions off of this one here and end up with a fixture to go over the outside. I'll put a plug on the inside to fit snug inside the tube, and then we'll try and tap this round with some sort of a tapered piece. And once we get that done, then we'll be in a position where we can solder the outside of this back together. And so went over to the milling machine, and we made this fixture here. And this is the first time I've ever done this, trying to true up a tube. Usually if it's pretty close to being true, I'll just solder it up underneath and be done with it. If it was this much out of round, normally I wouldn't fool with it. We'd just call it a parts gun and be done with it. So this is something new I'm trying out, and we'll see how it works. And what we've done here is we have a screw here, or a bolt through it, and a bolt through it up here, trying to keep the distance between the two fairly equal. And this is caused by when I sawed it in half, it took some material out here. So essentially bored out this hole, and it is concentric two 875 thousandths. And like I say, when we cut it, then that changed it a little bit, but it's still concentric on this side and concentric on this side. And what I've done is, just using calipers here, tried to get it so that the distance here is, well, it's a little bit more than 878 thousandths, but that's pretty close, and I think that's good enough for what we're going to do here. So the next step was to put together a tapered plug here, and what we're going to do is we're going to stand this up and put the plug in there and tap on it some and see if we can't reform the tube. So we have the tube in the vise, and we stood it up right here so we can tap on it. I'm not going to show the setup here that I have for supporting the other end of the tube, but it's temporary, I'll say that much about it. So here we go, we've got our tapered plug. I'm not going to use a heavy hammer, just a light mallet, and we'll just see what we can do to reform that. And that actually seems to be helping, especially on the part where it's opened up. Looking pretty good. Just a couple more here. Alright, let's take a look at this and see what we've got. Pull the fixture off. Well, not quite as good as I was hoping for. It's a little better than it was, but especially this part down here has been tapped into more of a round shape. There's still a little bit of deformation just looking at it here, but it is better than what it was. So I think we're going to call that good and go ahead and proceed to see if we can't solder this up. Alright, let's take a quick look at our program here. We have the tube is in a vise, and so it's held nice and steady. I made a piece of brass to fit over the it like that, and we're going to solder that on essentially. And what I have is at some point I bought a piece of brass tubing, and it's 7/8 inch on the inside diameter, so it actually fits over the outside of the tube here pretty well. I think I bought it just for this purpose. So we've got that. Let's see. I use Brownell's high force 44. This is a low temperature solder, so it flows pretty easily. As far as the flux, this is called Comet Flux, and this is good for all metals except for aluminum. And what this does is it's a rosin-based flux, and there's two types of flux. One is rosin-based, the other's acid-based, and I think for this application the rosin-based would be better. So that's what I use. There's some chalk that I also got from Brownell's. It's called soldering talc crayon, and so I use this to go around those areas so that I don't accidentally get some solder to run where we don't want it to run. I'll use a propane torch if I, you know, they make those little small torches, might have been best, but this is all I got, so that's what we're going to use. And let's see, the rule about soldering is, well, I guess there's 3 rules. One is it's got to be clean, and then it's got to be clean, and it's got to be clean. So we've degreased this, and we've degreased our the new piece we're going to be putting in. So we're pretty much set to go. I'm going to put this all back together, and I think we talked about a plug in here, and then the fixture is going to go over about there. So it'll all be held together at the right dimension, and then we'll get to soldering. We're going to put some flux onto the brass here, and onto our cross piece that we're going to be soldering on. Okay, and to hold this in place, we're going to use a clamp here. Oops, backwards. To go, to, you know, to kind of hold it so it doesn't fall off. Our solder ready. And this is, like I say, this is a low temperature solder, but it's pretty good for this particular kind of an application. So what we're going to do is try and heat it up until the flux starts running. Here's the heater. It's good. Not good. Alright, we've had this apart. I soldered it up, and I wasn't happy with the way it soldered, so we're going to try it again here and see if we can get this to where it looks good. I keep having a gap, and I think it's related to the tube being slightly out around. And it's not what I want. Good, that should about do it. Take a quick look. All right, I wasn't happy with the first joint that we did. I didn't feel like it was complete, and it turned out that the tube is still a little bit out of round, and so I fussed with that a little bit, trying to get the tube rounded and trying to get the patch so that it fits better over the tube, and we can still get our parts in and out, you know, roughly the right dimension. So that's where it's at, and we'll let this cool off, and then we'll take a look at this one and see how it turned out. Okay, well, it's cooled off now. You can see it's, I haven't cleaned it up yet. It's a little bit sloppy. I think there's some gaps in here that the tube is just still very slightly out of round, so that the joint is not touching at all locations around the tube. But we're going to try it like this and see what happens. And one good thing about solder is that as long as you don't destroy something, if this doesn't work and the joint breaks, we can always take it off, take everything out, and try it again, and see if we can get it better. Well, you know what? It's not as bad as I thought. This is after we've cleaned it up. The seal is actually pretty good. There's solder all around. There's no gaps in the crack, anything like that. So it looks pretty good from that standpoint. As far as the outside of the tube, we've cleaned it up, and it's not new looking, or it doesn't match the rest of the gun, but that's as good as we're going to get right there. So I think we're all right. And look at the joint on the other side here, if I can put that in there. These joints as well on both sides look pretty good. So I think we're in good shape, and we'll just have to see if it holds. So on this basis, I'm saying that the Streak from Hell has an intact tube. So we're going to go ahead and clean this up and see if we can't get it back together and make it work. And that's it right there.